The primary results are in. What does it tell us about this fall and midterm elections? Let's get the inside story. Good morning and welcome to Inside Story. We've put our fascinators away. The royal wedding is over. Now we're ready to be fascinated by politics. Let's introduce you to our panel this morning. We'll start with FNN pollster Terry Madonna. Good morning. Documentarian Sam Katz.
Hi, Tam.
Attorney and nonprofit exec George Burrell.
Good morning, Tam.
And a new friend for me, Liz Priate-Havey, a GOP state official. Let's get into this race. And Terry, I'm going to start with you. We are through the primary. We've seen some things. Does it foretell some things we should be looking at for the general, or is it a whole new ball game now?
Yeah, well, primaries always produce, in a sense, a new ball game, depending on who got nominated. But make no mistake about it, this is an election that is largely going to be at virtually every level a referendum on President Trump. Historically, midterm elections are referendums anyway. Go back, and by the way, not good for the president's party. You go back to the Civil War. The average loss for the president's party in Congress is 32 seats. If you go back to World War II and come forward, if the president's job performance is under 50%, the average loss in the first term is 36 seats. So at virtually every level, Donald Trump is going to be on the ballot. And right now, the Democrats are slightly favored to do better, but that's been decreasing as President Trump's job performance has increased.
Well, I was going to say, is that, with some political old hands at the table, is that good for Democrats? Because people will often say, you see a lot of the analysis that says, just running against Trump isn't enough. You've got to have something you're for, something that brings people out. Is saying just Trump is bad going to be enough for Democrats in the fall?
Successful Democratic candidates like Connor Lamb, the fellow who lost in Georgia in the special election and got close, have not made Trump the centerpiece of their campaign. They have talked about local issues. They have hugged the center, in some cases maybe moved a little bit right of center. There's some differences, though, in this congressional election for southeastern Pennsylvania. The redistricting of seats unique to Bucks, Chester, Montgomery, and Delaware counties, three of which went for Hillary Clinton in 2016, augur for an outcome that will significantly revamp the Pennsylvania congressional delegation.
Let's take a look at some of the results here, starting with Lieutenant Governor. Stack became the first sitting lieutenant governor to get kicked off the ticket, beaten by everybody else. John Fetterman will now be on the ticket with Governor Wolf. What does it tell us? Because we were always told that nobody pays attention to this office and incumbency has power, and he couldn't hold on to it.
Well, he had a lot of issues. He was not, to many people, a likable person, and he didn't treat people with respect that worked for him, and that was widely in the news, and the governor didn't like him, so I'm not surprised that he lost. I think you're going to see a big difference between Jeff Bartos and Mr. Fetterman. I have to admit that I am the chairperson of Jeff Bartos's campaign, statewide campaign. But Jeff is really a smart, articulate, calm, reasoned person. And if they have a debate, they'll be, I'm quite sure that Jeff will win that. But of course, you know, it's also tied to the governor. They run together, so they're not running separately. They're very different people.
Let's talk about being tied to the governor. To your point, Sam, Fetterman is very progressive. Bernie Sanders endorsed him. Is that good for Wolf? If the point now is to try to be a little bit more moderate, maybe get some independence, having this running mate who's seen as being very left, is it good for him?
I've heard from people who said they want to put the picture of the bearded Tom Wolf next to the bearded John Fetterman. Fetterman's a very smart guy, and I wouldn't underestimate his brains. I wouldn't underestimate his vision. But he's an eccentric in the way we expect politicians to look. Tom Wolf is low-key. Scott Wagner is not. I think this is going to be a bruising governor's race. I think Liz's point is really the one that's most important. You can't treat the people who work for you in your home badly and expect people, common people, average people, regular people, to feel good about you. And I think Mike Stack destroyed his political career in that episode.
And I think there are two or three things. Number one, I think in this election, you didn't see as much political organization as you typically do. I think Mike Stack was relying upon a much higher turnout in the city of Philadelphia. I think the governor, though, regardless of what you think about Fetterman, wins by subtraction. I think he's better off running with Fetterman than he is running with Stack. Stack was clearly going to be an issue in the campaign. But I think that there is also, it's important for Democrats to understand, typically people campaign to voters. Democrats have to persuade people who are not voting to vote if they are going to win. They must increase turnout in the African American community. One thing Fetterman does bring is he brings a constituency that's loyal to him. So he can bring some voters who may not otherwise get turned on by Tom Wolf himself.
This is a sit, look pretty, and say very little job. He's had a high profile. Is he going to like this job if he gets it?
I don't know that he'll like the job. I don't.
Lieutenant Governor.
But I think he's going to enjoy becoming a statewide visible personality.
He is going to do something that Governor Wolf needs, and that is to excite the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party, to excite the progressive wing. And this dude is 6'8", wears cargo shorts most of the time, and some kind of shirt that hangs out. He actually said that he has a couple of suits. If he gets elected, I'm using the subjunctive if, he's going to have to go onto the floor of the state senate of Pennsylvania in a suit and tie, or else he's gone. But he will certainly overshadow Tom Wolf in terms of personality as the campaign unfolds. But to go back to Liz's point, you get one vote. I don't know an election in modern history where the lieutenant governor elected the governor.
True.
You follow me? That's not
That's not happening.
So
that's
let's talk about Wolf versus Wagner. Two very, very wealthy men. The last governor's race, I think it was about $84 million that got spent. They say this one they will be spending even more money. Who has the edge here? They can both afford to put up a lot of ads, do a lot of things. Who's likely to triumph here at this point?
However Trump is doing the week before the election will dictate, in my mind. You know, there's a number, 40% say that are going to vote Republican. There's a number, 40% that are going to vote Democrat. The 20% are going to decide. And how they move is going to be dictated by the mood at the time, which Donald Trump completely controls.
But I think there's a pretty common view that Tom Wolf right now today is ahead. In that if he can figure out how to, in my judgment, if he can figure out how to be tough but not mean, I don't think he wants to get engaged in a mean campaign, because that's not his personality and that's not why people like him. And I think he's got to build upon what he already has in store.
But I think that Scott has. I think Scott does have a strong personality. The more time I spend with him and listen to him, the more I like him personally. You know, as we were talking about earlier, his employees love him. He pays them more than the minimum wage. He's going into areas, and he already has started to do that across the state, particularly in Philadelphia, that most Republican candidates would never do. And his message is not going to be that, typical conservative message. It's going to be one that's more inclusive, I believe.
But Liz, he's got a question. He's got two different things. There's the Wagner that comes across as I'm Trumpier than Trump, who we saw him when he first when he first won. That's who he wanted to be. Against Mango, he kind of got outflanked on the right. He was the guy who said, I support more rights for the LGBTQ community. I think the minimum wage should go up.
Right.
Which guy's going to show up in this election?
I think that Scott's going to continue the way he has been. I mean, I think the mainstream media has tried to paint him as Trump-esque because that's what they do. For people like me who know him, they know he has some of the positive qualities that Trump brings. He's a leader. He's passionate. He gets people excited. I was there on election night. People are just so thrilled with him. But he's also can thoughtfully go through issues and make decisions that are, people respect and regard. So
that'll be an interesting debate between him and Wolf.
I think this is going to be a serious race.
The bottom line here is on fiscal matters, on the budget, on things like property taxes and new taxes, and on pensions. He wants to start with zero-based budgeting. He's a rock-ribbed conservative. On a couple of these issues.
But what's wrong with zero-based budgeting? I think it's fantastic.
Now hold on, I'm merely pointing out that he's a conservative. But make no mistake about it, he's not just Trump-like in terms of supporting Donald Trump. He's Trump-like in terms of his personality and style. You never know what he's going to say. You never know what he's going to do. And let's be honest about this. I'm not saying that's a negative. I'm just saying there's
unpredictable.
You took the word right out of my mouth.
Speaking of more predictable, might be Barletta versus Casey. And if you think Wagner is kind of like Trump, Barletta even more so in terms of what he's saying that he has to offer. How does that race shape up? The president already tweeting in support of Barletta. I would expect you will see him in the state stumping for him. Is that good for Barletta or not? And where does it stand for Casey, who's part of a political dynasty in this state?
That's not going to be a close election. Bob Casey.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I will bet this coffee cup.
That's my coffee
Oh, it's
mug.
yours. I'm sorry, but I would bet anything. Lou Barletta is not a great candidate. Not that Bob Casey is a great candidate, but he's an institution, and Democrats are comfortable with Casey. They've known that name for 4 or 5 decades. Bob Casey will enjoy an enormous amount of support from national Democrats who will feel aggrieved by virtue of what transpired in 2016. This will not be a close election, in my opinion.
Everybody agree with him?
Yeah, I think he also, both in the Senate race and in the gubernatorial race, both of those candidates are identified with Trump. And it makes no difference how much you like them personally. Who they are is defined by who they are on television, and both of them have identified themselves on television with Trump.
Yeah, look, the bottom line here is Lou Barletta was really Trump before Trump was Trump on immigration when he got into all these lawsuits when he was mayor of Hazleton. He co-chaired the Trump campaign in Pennsylvania, and he was on the transition team. I looked and tried to find an issue difference between Lou Barletta and President Trump on one little matter of education, not little matter, but education funding. That will be one of the key national referenda on Donald Trump in this state. And I agree with Sam. I think Casey would be, at the start, the favorite to win.
And we keep being told.
Just one quick thing to add. You know, in the Southeast, right, Trump is not that popular, but in the rest of the state, he really is. And there are people in the rest of the state who have reached out to me who say, we love Barletta, we love Barletta. So there is some excitement out there. You're right, he's running against an institution. Bob Casey's going to be very difficult to beat. I do think that the race that's the one to watch is the governor's race.
In every poll that has been done, public poll, Donald Trump's job performance in Pennsylvania is lower than his job performance is nationally.
If there's one standard, though, in politics, that the popularity of a person is not transferable.
So
it's
we will
just
see.
not transferable to
We also have heard a lot of talk here in Pennsylvania about this being the year of the woman. We know at least one of these seats will be going to a woman because it's going to be Scanlon versus Kim, both female. We saw a number of other women win, at least the primary, Madeline Dean, Christy Houlihan, who didn't have to run against anybody. What are we supposed to expect to see in the fall? Like, just because you're running doesn't mean that you win.
Probably in the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th congressional districts, they will go Democratic because of the Pennsylvania remedial Supreme Court, the remedial map that redrew the boundary lines, as Sam pointed out earlier on. But here's the key. Here's the key. In the last 25 years, there have only been 4 women elected to Congress. 3 of them succeeded their husbands. In the entire history of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania,
So we'll be seeing something new if they win.
Only 7 women have won seats in Congress. We're going to see at least 3.
What does it tell us that Scanlon won Delco? Richie Laser, he had Kenny, he had Johnny Doc. What does it tell us? Is this now a Delco seat? Forget it,
Well, it
South
was a
Philly.
Delco seat, and the idea that it wasn't going to be a Delco seat was only made possible by the number of Delaware County candidates, which of course ended up not being the fact. But this is a seminal moment for Philadelphia in Washington. We used to have 3 congressmen, and they had seniority. At one point we had Chaka Fattah, Bob Brady. We now have the most junior delegation of 2 that we could possibly have. Philadelphia's influence in Washington on matters of appropriation and infrastructure and all the things that matter to the city have been so diminished in the last 5 or 6 years. The fight over Delaware County was a massive loss for the Democratic Party in Philadelphia, the Democratic machine, and the losses of Kilkenny in Northeast Philadelphia and a couple of other guys. Not a good sign for the IBEW and John Doherty's influence.
We saw a lot of incumbents.
Long overdue, I would add.
We saw a lot of incumbents in our last minute. Brendan Boyle, Brian Fitzpatrick, and Dwight Evans prevail in these redrawn districts. Does that tell us that incumbency, even in these changed circumstances, is still strong?
Well, Dwight is
Incumbency is strong.
Look,
No, I'm saying they won even though things got moved around.
The point is, in Congress, name me an incumbent member of Congress who lost the seat. Remember, seven of the 18 members of our delegation that aren't seeking re-election. 3 already quit.
Right.
The 3 seats we're talking about No incumbent. Pat Meehan is gone. Ryan Costello is
right.
gone,
And
and there was no
incumbent
there was no
So
Montgomery
are we
County
sort of
seat.
saying that maybe it will be 2 years from now when we really start to see what these new districts look like, when people have
Well,
had
4
more
years from
time?
now they'll be different. So.
Right,
Yeah,
there-
4 years,
exactly.
and we'll lose a seat. We'll go from 18 to 17. This is the largest number of resignations and retirements in modern history.
One
Seven,
thing I
seven
would
of
add,
18.
one thing
Very
I would add
quickly.
among the congressional candidates, Congressman Boyle, Michelle Lawrence got 37% of the vote in that race. So there's a
Yeah.
clearly, you know,
Something cooking out there.
a
And
grounding
Delaware-
for candidates to
Lehigh
run in that place.
County is going to be really the bellwether, because that was a race that that's a seat that
Right.
Charlie Dent held. That a
Yeah.
Democrat, I think
That's
Susan
right.
Wild could win that
Yeah.
seat.
All right, well, we'll take a short break and come back to more on Inside Story.